Hi, Nelson. Hi, Phil.
Erev Tov.
Hi.
Is your handout is the same as last week?
The handout's the same. Yeah. You can click on it in the announcement. Hi.
Hi, Michael.
Hello, Dr. Rappaport. I prefer if you use my correct title, Dr. Rappaport. That's my wife, if you don't.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah. My Myra's on upstairs.
I
If we're
didn't
in
come
the
up with a
same
good
area, it's
comeback
too
yet.
noisy. If we're in the same area, it's too noisy. So,
Yeah.
also, folks should have a machzor available. That'll make it much easier. I'm tempted to tell people before we begin, please turn off all your electronic equipment so it doesn't disturb us, but then then we wouldn't be able to communicate. So. All right, I'll wait one more minute. Hi. Okay, it's 7:01. So I think we should probably begin. Just to remind people, one, you should have a machzor handy. And number two, also have to be able to click on the resource that was included with the announcement, because I'm going to be moving over there. So I will still be able to hear you, but I will not be able to see you for a bit while I'm on that page. With that, I would just request that people feel free, please, to speak up. Any questions, agreement, disagreements, things you're not sure about, just please, please, please speak up. Please do not be bashful at all. Otherwise, you'll just end up having me talk. So what I want to do tonight is, last week we spoke about some of the challenges we face, emphasize some issues of, spending some time looking at the nusach, the tunes associated with the tefillot, with the prayers, and that can be helpful for one's own individual davening. And as well, we looked at some ideas related to the Haftorah in terms of Chana and the sense of this combination on Rosh Hashanah, both being issues of individual prayers and desires as manifest in Chana, but also Chana manifesting and having a sense of a vision of what of something broader than herself, but really a vision of a transformation of society, and particularly this society, which was one which was actually fairly corrupt at its core based religious institutions. And the Mishkan in Shiloh was, Eli, the priest, was okay, but his two sons were corrupt. And she has this envision of something of which involves a transformation of the society as well. And so that on Rosh Hashanah, having both these elements as well, both our own concerns, which are real and important, but also a sense also of a broader vision, and that certainly will play itself out in the liturgy as well. So those were a couple of things that we looked at tonight. What I'd like to do is focus a little bit more on the nitty-gritty for those who will be davening at home. So what should we be davening? And how much of what we should we be davening or choose to daven? And if we have time, we'll also be able to go into perhaps a couple of additional themes of the Machzor, to point out a couple of ideas of what we'll be davening. But first, what I'd like to do is go, first I would like to go to the link that you had, which has the structure and the pages for the davening of what one does as an individual if one is not able to be at religious services, participating in shul. So if folks could turn to that, I'm gonna, again, you may not see me anymore. When I leave the screen, just someone speak up and just make sure that you can still hear me. I don't think I'm cutting myself off. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right. So again, I can't see you, unfortunately, but I can hear you. So again, feel free to speak up, because if you raise your hand or look perplexed, I won't be able to see it on the screen. So I'm on the page of the handout. The handout is from B'nai David Judea, which is a shul in Los Angeles. They did a great job of preparing this, and so there was no reason to duplicate it. And so we'll just go through the liturgy for this year for Rosh Hashanah. So like any questions, ask. I don't know how much to assume or not assume. So any questions, please ask, and all questions are fine. And if there's something you're not sure about, just ask. No need to feel, oh, I should really know that, therefore I won't ask. Just ask. Totally safe space we have. All right, so Rosh Hashanah begins this Friday evening. So of course, one of the things to keep in mind is that it's also Shabbat. And while sometimes within the context of holidays, and particularly of Rosh Hashanah, where the themes of the davening become much more central. And on Shabbat is the theme of the davening. Rosh Hashanah it's there, but it's certainly much less central. And so sometimes we have to remind ourselves, yes, it is also Shabbat. And so within the davening, there'll be the special inclusions for Shabbat. So at some time Friday afternoon, and it doesn't have to be right before, it doesn't have to be after candlelighting or right before sundown, but sometime in the afternoon, the tradition is, of course, to do mincha, the afternoon service. You have the pages there between the Korah and the Birnbaum and the art scroll. It's a regular weekday mincha. It's no different than any other weekday mincha service. You don't add anything. There's no changes to it. Just as a reminder, because we'll be doing a session on Yom Kippur after Rosh Hashanah, mincha on Erev Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, has some changes, and we'll focus on those then. But mincha before Rosh Hashanah is a standard mincha. And then you have candle lighting at 6:36. This may be the Los Angeles time. I looked at what we have on our refrigerator, where my wife posts the candle lighting information. Her candle lighting time for Erev Rosh Hashanah for Friday is 6:35. So it's approximate. That's fine. Then in the third line, as it points out, because it's also Friday, Erev Shabbat, because it's Friday evening, we recite 2 psalms from Kabbalat Shabbat before beginning Mariv, the evening service. Normally on Friday nights, we have Kabbalat Shabbat. And Kabbalat Shabbat is a service which we do to welcome Shabbat, that we don't just transition. We don't just go from weekday into Shabbat, but we have this service of transition, which is Kabbalat Shabbat, which is welcoming Shabbat. Of course, we recite a number of psalms followed by Licha Dodi. Our tradition is not to do that. But we still have to acknowledge that it is Shabbat. So even for candle lighting, you'll be lighting candles both for Rosh Hashanah as well as for Shabbat. So whatever book you use for the proper blessing, just please follow it. And I'm sure it must be in the Machzor somewhere or any. And yeah, you use the blessing. Is Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbat V'Yom Tov, to light the candles for Shabbat and a holiday, and Shehefiyanu, which is done as well by the person who lights the candles. Because it's, as I said, it's Friday night, for Kabbalah, we do 2 psalms. I'm on page 46 now in the art scroll, but again, you have the pages there, so just follow along. These psalms, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat, the psalm for the Sabbath day, Psalm 92, followed by Psalm 93. And once one recites these psalms, then one is accepting upon oneself Shabbat. So again, while we are not downplaying Shabbat, Shabbat becomes downplayed somewhat, but we still have to positively affirm it is Shabbat, and we do that through the reciting of those 2 psalms. And then we come to Ma'ariv, the evening service for Rosh Hashanah, on whatever page. You have the page there, either 50, 23, or 53. The Ma'ariv for Rosh Hashanah is not really radically different than a normal Ma'ariv, than a normal evening service for a Shabbat or a holiday, and which is just slightly different than a Ma'ariv service for a weekday. Now, because we are at home and not participating with a minyan, therefore in Ma'ariv we do not recite Baruch Hu, which is at the top of the page. Baruch Hu is only recited in the context of the minyan, as well as the response afterwards to Baruch Hu, Baruch Hashem Mevarach L'Olam Va'ed. That's only done in a minyan. So one does not do that individually. One would begin individually with the first bracha of Ma'ariv. There are two blessings, paragraph blessings, before we come to the Shema. And so those are recited. Again, if you can prepare and listen to some things and get into your mind to do the Rosh Hashanah, to do something.
I don't understand what I'm doing anyway.
We'll read in English.
So we'll read in English. Take us all day to read it all in English.
Yeah, we're fine. It's fine to do it in English. That's not don't worry about davening in English. If you don't understand the Hebrew, absolutely, please do the English. No question, absolutely. But even in the English, if you could remember the tune. No, I may have the wrongness up there. Yeah. So you have that, that's dropping out of my mind at the moment. But if you can remember that nusach, the tune, that just might be nice for you. But then you have, for Ma'ariv, you have these on the paragraphs, two blessing paragraphs before the Shema. Then you come to the Shema. Again, this is standard evening service. You have the paragraphs of the Shema, followed by the blessings after the Shema. And then where you would add something different, if you turn to either, I'm on page 60 in the art scroll, Birnbaum is 29, or the Koren is 65. You have two paragraphs you would add. One paragraph that we recite every Friday night, Vishamru, which is a quote from the book of Exodus, which is just acknowledging that it's Shabbat, that Israel will keep Shabbat. And then, since it's also Rosh Hashanah, we have a tradition to recite a verse about Rosh Hashanah. This is from Psalm 81. Tichu b'chodesh shofar b'kesel liyom chagenu. Blow the shofar at the moon's renewal, the appointed time for our festive day, or it's a law of Israel, judgment of the God of law, perhaps judgment of the God of Jacob. So we have that tradition to recite that as well, so that before we begin the Amidah, we are already setting the stage. Hey, we know it's Rosh Hashanah. This isn't just a Ma'ariv for Shabbat. This isn't just a regular weekday service. It's helping us getting to the consciousness that this is also Rosh Hashanah. Now, on that same page, either 6029 or 65, it'll probably be the same page. You'll have a Chatzi Kaddish, but that's only recited with a minyan. One does not recite any Kaddishes at home without a minyan, whether it's a half Kaddish or a full Kaddish. So those are excluded. One would go from the verse of Tichu b'chodesh shofar, blow the shofar, and then you have the Amidah. All right, now if no one's being attacked by a dog,
Here's a Kaddish.
can you go on mute, please? Everyone go on mute, please. And please go on mute, and then if you have questions, just go off mute. But please go on mute for this. That'll just be easier. But again, go off mute with any questions or any comments. We then come now to the Amidah for Ma'ariv, which is on page 62, 31, or 67, and you have the pages there. It's important to keep in mind, because when you get really to the Amidah, you really have the sense of that it's Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah stands out much more in the Amidah, that this is really very much a different time. So for example, you have, after the first paragraph, just the first paragraph known as a vote, where you mention the patriarchs. I'm looking at the art scroll, it has it in bold, others may have it not in bold. You add something which you will add for Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur. Zachreinu l'chaim, God should remember us for life. Melech hafetz b'chaim, the king who desires life. V'kadvenu b'sefer chaim, and inscribe us in the book of life. L'mancha Elohim chayim, for your sake, O living God, or God of life. All right, so if you know the Hebrew, and even in the English, the word life repeats there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times there's a life in just a few words. So certainly, even bound up with just that phrase, you have some of the key themes, at least some of the key themes of Rosh Hashanah. 1, God is a king. The notion of God as king is critical to Rosh Hashanah. 2, asking God to remember us, critical for Rosh Hashanah. These 2 things, with others, form the core of the Musaf service. Writing us in the book of life, we all are familiar with that notion, and it certainly is central to Nisan Tokev. And so already here you begin to come to this key themes of Rosh Hashanah. And then the Amidah continues. I'm now on page 64 in the art scroll, where you have another line which comes only during this time of the year. Micha mocha varachamim, who is like you, merciful fathers, zocher yitzurav l'chaim barachamim, who remembers, recalls, again, a form of zocher, remembering, recalling his creatures, again, l'chaim, for life. Okay, now it's barachamim, with mercy. But again, the theme of remembrances and life. And then then in that middle of the page, you have another change that occurs for Rosh Hashanah davening, and that is you have the line, "You are holy, Atah kadosh v'Cha kadosh." You are holy, your name is holy, holy ones praise you forever. Normally, right after that, there would be a blessing, which would conclude, "Blessed is God, Baruch Hashem, Ha'el HaKadosh," God, the holy God. However, what we have on Rosh Hashanah is we enlarge this blessing of the sanctity of God's name, and we make a critical change. So you have included here is a few paragraphs of God instill your awe and all on works, your dread, your awe, and really your fear, your dread and all you created. And then you continue the next paragraph, and so God grant honor to your people. Then you have a third paragraph, and so the righteous will see and be glad. Then you have a fourth paragraph, V'timloch ata, that God, you will reign. Again, this element of kingship, which is a critical central theme of Rosh Hashanah, this element of kingship of God. And then we have, for the final paragraph, the blessing, Kadosh ata, God, you're holy, your name is awesome, there's no God other than you, etc. And then we have Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you, God. And we don't say Ha'el HaKadosh, God, the holy God, like we do the rest of the year. The Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, we say HaMelech HaKadosh, all right? God who's the holy king. And that, again, that key theme of kingship. And indeed, traditional practice says that if you say Ha'el HaKadosh like you normally would do, and not say HaMelech HaKadosh, you have to go back and begin again. All right? So this theme, again, of kingship, remembrances, life, it's all there, even in the first section of the Amidah. It's going to repeat over and over again in different forms of the liturgy. All right, and then you have the rest of the Amidah. I don't need to go through it, except to point out on Saturday night for Ma'ariv, there'll be an additional paragraph which is recited on Saturday night. Because what one does on Saturday night when one recites Ma'ariv, it is no longer Shabbat. Now, normally when it's no longer Shabbat, we have to recite Havdalah.
we have to separate between Shabbat, ben Kodesh l'chol, between holy and normal. And so we do Havdalah, we recite Havdalah, we separate, we distinguish between Shabbat and the rest of the week. Since the second day of Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Tov, we still do Havdalah, but we do it in a way which is not separating Shabbat and the rest of the week, but it's distinguished between the sanctity of Shabbat, which is out of a higher level than the sanctity of the rest of the week. So you have, it's not being distinguishing ben Kodesh l'chol, between the holy and the regular, but ben Kodesh l'kodesh, between the holy and the holy. Okay. And then also in the liturgy, you'll see in your machzor to add the words in there that you would add for Shabbat. And then you go through the Amidah, and the Amidah will conclude. There's a couple of other small changes that occur as well. We also add another point, lines. Just follow along your machzor carefully. God should write us for a good year. And also we end Sim Shalom. Some people end the final blessing of Sim Shalom with Oseh HaShalom. It changes the ending. Just follow along what's in your machzor. Again, whether you're on the Hebrew side or the English side. And then that's the end of the Amidah. It points out after the Amidah, you say Vayechulu, which is just the verses from Genesis, beginning of chapter 2. It's 3 verses, and it lists the pages there, what to do. Then there's a tradition of reciting a psalm, LeDavid Mizmor, Psalm 24. Again, you have the page for it there. You can recite it, again, in the Hebrew or in the English. It's a psalm we include for on Rosh Hashanah. Then there is no Kaddish. Again, Kaddish is only done with a minyan. There's no Kaddish, but one would then do Aleinu. And you have the pages there, followed by LeDavid, this special paragraph we've been saying, Psalm 27, since Rosh Chodesh Elul. They also say you can end with Yigdal. You want to sing Yigdal at the end, fine. You want to sing Adon Olam at the end, fine. You don't want to sing any of those at the end, that's also fine. That the Yigdal or Adon Olam is purely extra. Okay, let me stop there for a minute. Any questions? And just unmute yourself if you have questions.
Okay, ask your question.
The question I'm going to ask, if somebody is saying Kaddish, Memorial Kaddish,
Yeah.
you say it just the same at the
No.
end of the service, or
No,
do
you
you omit it?
You omit it. I'm sorry, but it has to be omitted. It only can be said with a minyan.
All right, because I belong to a synagogue in Toronto, and we Zoom every morning because I'm saying Kaddish, and we all say Kaddish.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, where they do it at Skokie Valley also. Kaddish can be recited. If you're asking me a particular halakhic question, I'll answer the way I understand it. Others may disagree. Is that what many people do? It depends, but what many people do is if there is a minyan saying Kaddish that you're zooming into, in which there is an actual minyan physically in place, and someone's saying Kaddish, you can say Kaddish along with them.
Okay.
Some traditional folks will not say Kaddish in a Zoom minyan where there's no actual physical presence of a minyan. But when you're an individual alone, I'm sorry.
You can.
You can't.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that if you're saying Kaddish for the person for whom you're saying Kaddish, that you cannot not think about. You can simply think about them. If you want to recite a psalm in their memory, that's certainly fine. But unfortunately, Kaddish cannot be said.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good. Now we come to Shacharit. So if you can turn to page, in the art scroll, it's 162, and it's 123 in the Birnbaum and 243 in the Koren. The issue here we're going to have to address, or you're going to have to decide, is how much of this you want to say. So what this list gives you everything that would be said, and even you would end up doing more than what they're doing in synagogue, because synagogue has a limit of about 2 hours. They're trying to do the davening in 2 hours for the people who will be in shul, whether under a tent or in the building. At home, you're not faced by the time limit, but you still have to decide on some level what works for you. If you don't understand what's going on for certain things, I wouldn't worry about not saying them. So, and I'll point out what those things are. So, for example, Shir HaYichud, there's special songs which are recited for whatever day Rosh Hashanah falls out. The one, because it's Shabbat this year, there's in the Birnbaum it's 123, the art scroll it's 162. If you want to say it, fine. If you don't want to say it, that would be okay too. And again, wherever it says Kaddish afterwards, just ignore it because you can't say it. Then there's Shir HaKavod, which is Anim Zemirot, which is you have on 166 and the Birnbaum 127, 249. Follow along in the chart. Again, you want to sing it, say it, fine. You don't want to, that will also be fine. Next, yes?
I have a question on Anim Zemirot. When you're davening at home, do you stand? Yeah. Do you stand?
It would certainly be appropriate to stand. I don't see why not. Yeah, I think it's a good question because you're asking a broader question.
Yes.
What I would say is stand for those things you normally stand for in services. So, for example, I'm glad you brought this up because this chart doesn't deal with choreography. Yeah, we stand for the Amidah. The Amidah means stand, prayer recited standing. So you should stand for the Amidah, of course, assuming you're able, all things being equal, assuming you're able. So for those things which you would normally stand for in services, I think it would be nice to stand for it at home. And that's a good point.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point. Then you have a Shir Shel Yom for Shabbat, the Psalm for Shabbat. We recited it the previous night to welcome Shabbat, and here it's also recited. We recite it usually at the end of services. Rosh Hashanah people tend to recite it early on. It's an important psalm to recite because, again, it's an acknowledgement that it's Shabbat. Each day of the week, we acknowledge the particular quality of the day. So that should be said. And following it is LeDavid, again, Psalm 27, that psalm we have included since Rosh Chodesh Elul for this time. Then you have, again, Adon Olam and Yigdal. You have the pages. You want to say those, fine. You don't want to say those, that's okay. Not a problem at all. You also... Then you also have the blessings for the morning, M-O-R-N-I-N-G, the various blessings for the morning. Those should be recited. They're going to be at different places in your Sidurim. In the art scroll, they're starting at 182. I don't have the Koren. I think Myra has the Koren upstairs. And in the Birnbaum, in the Birnbaum, they're earlier. In the Birnbaum, they're found earlier. On page like 57. So the morning blessings, M-O-R-N, those are, one should recite those. Those are part of the daily liturgy. Nothing special about them for Rosh Hashanah, but they're just would be recited as part of the daily liturgy. So let me, so they're there, and let me then skip to get to Psuke de Zimra, which is the introductory part of the tefillah. You have it. You also have the pages there. It includes the blessings. Some people also will recite for after the blessings. They'll recite a little bit of it and continue. And then there's also the long list of the sacrifices. Many people skip that out and just go to the final concluding section of that begins. Rabbi Yishmael says the key part there is reciting for sure all the morning blessings. Those are the real key part that absolutely should be recited. All right, you have me? Then we come to other parts of the rest of Psuke de Zimra. Psuke de Zimra runs, you see how many pages it runs, what's listed there. It's 184 to 264, 59 to 89, 133. You have it's long. Here for Psuke de Zimra, you should decide how much of it you want to do. Ideally, in synagogue, they're going to be shortening it. Here you have the time, but again, how much you're used to it, how much you're comfortable with it, what you're used to. For sure, and this is important, Psuke de Zimra is structured around, it begins with a long blessing and then ends with a long blessing at the end. The middle parts, some parts are really preferred, some parts are, I don't want to say optional, but if they're left out, it's not a problem. But the first of the blessings towards the beginning of it, I'm on page, either I'll give you two of the pages, either 220 in the art scroll, in the Birnbaum, it's on, hold on, in the Birnbaum, it's on 133. And if any of you have Koren, just shout out the page, please.
You're talking about Baruch Shamar?
Yeah.
That's on
Mizmor Shir and Baruch Shamar. Yeah.
Okay, so Mizmor Shir is on 297. The pages that when they give 267, they're putting together some of the Birkot HaShachar.
Yeah, I'm aware.
With
that's why I have.
Yeah, so
yeah.
So it starts at
so
297.
Baruch Shamar is the long, thank you, Maria. Baruch Shamar is the long opening blessing. That has to be recited. Okay, that's key. Then there's a whole series of biblical passages, which is what Psuke de Zimra is. Some are composed of different passages together. Much of it are psalms. So it's considered preparation for davening. So as much of it as you're comfortable doing, one can do. What is absolutely necessary, bottom line, is Baruch Sha'amar, the blessing piece, then Ashrei, which is in the middle of Psuke de Zimra. It's on 266 in the art scroll. It's on 153 in the Birnbaum. Ashrei is absolutely critical, absolutely critical.
And 327 in Koren.
Thank you, good. So that's absolutely a critical part of Psuke de Zimra. And then it's, again, more psalms after that. You have the last, the endings of, you go from Psalm 146 through Psalm 150. Those are also considered important. And then, however, then you have some more you can say. But where you absolutely should begin, again, if you choose to do less, we're talking about minimally Baruch Sha'amar, Ashrei, and then you should begin what is on Nishmat Kol Chai, which is 258 in the Birnbaum. In the Art Scroll, it's on page middle of 165.
343 in Koran.
Great, thank you. And that's absolutely critical to be said. It is all that from Nishmat on is considered the last of that blessing, that long blessing part. So we have Nishmat, and then it continues through Hamelech, emphasizing again, it'll be emphasized in Yomachter, God is king. And then we come to the final blessing begins Yishtabach, and then you come to either 264, 171, 349. You add a psalm at this point, which would be nice, good to recite. It's a psalm which is, I call out from you from the depths. So this is sort of the anxiety psalm of Rosh Hashanah, I would say. The fear and trembling psalm of Rosh Hashanah. The sense of if we're calling out God as king, that may be evoking in us a sense of fear and trembling. So that's recited. Then Chatzi Kaddish we do not do because we don't have the minyan. Baruch we do not do because we don't have a minyan. But then we continue with the regular Shacharit morning service that we, on Saturday, you follow what your book says, what you do on Shabbat. And then Sunday, it'll change a little bit. You do not have to add, this may be a little confusing, but you do not have to add any of those extra prayers. In some of the books, they may, I'm not sure how it's formulated. In the Art Scroll, it says first day, second day. In the Birnbaum, it says also first day, second day. There's some additional short prayers that are there. There's no need to recite them. Rather, on first Shabbat, you'll go right to, you can just leave those out. After the blessing, it begins with a blessing. After you don't do Baruch Hu, but you do the blessing afterwards. And then you can continue in the Machzor, where it says on Shabbat, continue on Shabbat. The Hebrew words are Hakol Yoducha, all will thank you. During weekdays, you begin a little bit differently. You don't do the part for Shabbat. But then you just go straight through. You'll sing, you can do El Adon, which we say every Shabbat. This all one should do. Again, Hebrew or English is fine. Feel free to sing it. Then you have the blessings before the Shema, which are similar standard blessings. You'll also see that after Kadosh, 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 holy, 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 also the Machzors will have some additional prayers you can add. Most people leave those out, and I'm saying recommending leaving them out. They leave them out even in shul. Most shuls do not do them anymore. And then, so just you can leave those out. And then you continue the blessings before the Shema itself, and the blessings after the Shema until you'll come to the Amidah, and either 296, 201, or 381. The Amidah, again, this is recited standing. You'll see what you included in the Amidah the previous night, you will also be including here. So just follow along the instructions of the Machzor. And also, there'll be some additions for Shabbat because it's Shabbat. A few words of additions here and there. So again, just add those into the Machzor. And so just again, follow along what the Machzor is telling you to do. You'll see you'll see some of the additions from the night before, and then the middle part changes a bit because it's a morning MORN service, and then you come to the end of the Amidah. Now, because it is, first of all, after the Amidah, I'll do this first. One, because you are davening individually, there is no repetition of the Amidah. So what would normally be, as let's say in 306 in the art scroll, or middle of 209 in the Birnbaum, and whatever it is in the Koren, all right?
399.
We don't do it because you can only do the Chazin's repetition when you have a minyan. So you don't do it. What it means is that the various piyutim, poems, liturgy we add, you don't have an opportunity to recite in the context of a repetition of the Amidah. However, should you choose, should you want to say some of the piyutim, some of the poems with which you may very well be familiar, you have that listed here. It says it explicitly. Although we do not repeat the Amidah when davening home, you're welcome to recite the following piyutim taken from there, all right? And it has the pages. But again, you're reciting them after you have completed your individual Amidah. I want to be very clear. You do not add them into your Amidah. You simply, after you've done the individual Amidah, you recite, if you choose to recite these, sing these, please feel free to do it. They have the many themes of Rosh Hashanah. God is king, God who with judgment, all the themes of Rosh Hashanah. So you can certainly optionally choose to say those, all right? Then also, we can skip ahead a bit. As it points out, when it is Shabbat, we normally say Avinu Malkeinu on Rosh Hashanah, which would be found, it would be found 384 in the scrolls, and in Birnbaum, it's on 271. We don't say it on Shabbat. You'll say it on Sunday, but we don't say it on Shabbat, just to point that out. All right, now, because we don't have a minyan, we also don't take out the Torah. So the whole Torah service is not done, and we also don't do the Torah reading. Now, in your machzors, you have what is read from the Torah. It is perfectly fine to spend some time reading it. It's perfectly fine to spend some time discussing it. It's perfectly fine if you have other books at home that have the Bibles and commentaries to look at it and to learn something from it, but we don't formally do it as part of the service when we're at home. It's only done when it's done with the congregation, all right? So as such, there's a lot to leave out. Now, we don't blow shofar on Shabbat either, so the whole shofar service is left out. So really, what we come to after that is, on the pages are there, 443, 19, or 503, we come to Ashrei, which, again, you have the Hebrew, again, you want to the English, do the English. Then there's no Torah to return, so you would skip out the part of returning the Torahs to the Ark, and you go right to Musaf, which you
question,
have.
please?
Yes, please.
We do not need to do the first paragraph of Yakum Purkan?
Oh, it didn't mention it here. Yeah, if you want, do it. I wouldn't worry about it too much. You want to do the first paragraph of Yakum Purkan, do the first paragraph of Yakum Purkan, which is on page what's 428 in here, but that's fine. I wouldn't terribly worry about it. But you only would do the first paragraph, not. And some even say you don't do it unless you're in a. Well, no, you don't. You only would do the first paragraph if you want. Okay, now many of you are familiar with Hineni, which the Chazan would recite before Musaf. Well, we don't recite it because, again, we don't have a minyan. We're not in shul. So you come to then the Musaf Amidah, no Chatzi Kaddish. I guess that requires a minyan. But you come then to the Musaf Amidah, which you have listed, the pages you have listed there. So again, just follow along the instructions of your machzor. Please remember to add the inclusions for Shabbat. Now, Musaf has within it many of the famous piyutim, Unasana Tokev, etc., the Chom Aminim. So this chart, again, you don't repeat the Amidah, so you do the individual Amidah individually, but then afterwards, if you want to recite some of these piyutim, feel free to recite some of the piyutim, and you have sort of the famous ones listed over, you have some of the famous ones in their pages listed over there. Please feel free to do them. And if you want to do them together with someone if you have someone in the house to do it with, please feel free. Not required, but there's some of the highlights. I mean, it's hard to do Rosh Hashanah without Unasana Tokev, even if we're doing it after the Amidah. It's still nice to do. Okay, and then Musaf concludes, as most services conclude, with Ein Keloheinu Aleinu and Adon Olam. And that's the end of the davening for the morning of the first day. Any quick questions on that? I know it's a lot, but you follow the instructions. Any questions? Again, but one of the things, Psukei de Zimra, think of how much you want to do with it. Feel free, there's no rush. Pace yourself. I know it's hard. I'm not going to pretend this isn't hard to do. This is hard to do. It's much easier to do in the sense when you're with other people. This is hard to do. It's a challenge thinking about, but it also gives you an opportunity to think about, notice things because you're not in a rush, and to be able to understand certain things, questions that may emerge from the machzor itself. Okay. There's an afternoon service for Rosh Hashanah. You have the instructions there as well. Again, it's a regular afternoon service, but you just do what's there. Again, no Kaddishes, no Avinu Malkeinu. Saturday, we normally read the Torah in the afternoon, but we don't do it because we're not in a minyan, etc. Ma'ariv, it would be nice to wait for Ma'ariv until it is actually dark, around 7:30, 7:35. Ma'ariv is the same as the night before. You have the pages, but you don't add anything for Shabbat because it's no longer Shabbat, of course. However, remember in the Amidah, you add that paragraph where it will say on Saturday night add, because it's Saturday night and you have to distinguish between the different levels of holiness of Shabbat. And then after the Amidah, again, you have LeDavid Mizmor, and then Aleinu and LeDavid, exactly similar to the previous night. And if you want to sing Yigdal or Adon Olam at the end, as we say, Gesund Teheit, more power to you. Now, the next day, for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, same thing in terms of the beginning. However, the shir, if you choose to do the shir Hayichud, you do the one for Sunday, and the pages are there. The same decisions you'll have to make about how much to do with Psukei de Zimra. You will have to do then, keeping in mind the minimum for Psukei de Zimra is Baruch Sha'amar, the first blessing, Ashrei, and then Nishmat Kol Chai through the end, as we saw for the day before. Then, of course, you would add the special psalm, Shir HaMa'alot. And then Shacharit, again, same thing, except you're doing now the Shacharit for a quote-unquote weekday, meaning it's not Shabbat, and leave out those additional first day or prayers that were said recited on the second day only. You can leave those out. It's the same Shacharit, the blessings before the Shema, Shema, the blessings afterwards. Then you come again to the Amidah and recite the Amidah, again standing. There's no repetition of the Amidah, exactly like the day before. But again, you have an option to say, after you finish Amidah, to recite certain of the piyutim, which again, I recommend. These are sort of the popular ones, the ones that are known well, and that can add to your sense of the day. What you do add, though, because it's not Shabbat, is you will add Avinu Malkeinu. As it says, after the Amidah, we recite Avinu Malkeinu. You have the pages there. And Avinu Malkeinu should be reciting standing, if possible. Now, we don't do Torah reading again. Feel free to read the sections on your own. Shofar. If you are blowing shofar by yourself, then you would do the shofar service at this point. If you're not blowing shofar, and it's right in the Machzor, if you're not blowing shofar, perhaps someone will be blowing later, and you'll have a chance to hear it later on in the day. Then you would just leave out shofar, and then you come to, again, exactly as the day before, Ashrei, Musaf for the second day. You have the pages there. Again, individually recited Musaf. We don't do the repetition, but again, you want to do some of the piyutim. How can you not have Rosh Hashanah with some of the piyutim? Some of the ones and the pages are suggested there. And then you conclude Musaf. And then at the end of Musaf, you have Ein Kolaheinu Aleinu. And again, you want to sing Adon Olam. Please feel free to sing Adon Olam. And then there's a mincha in the afternoon and a weekday ma'ariv at the end of the davening, and the instructions are over there. So again, mostly it's following along in the Machzor. It's leaving out the repetitions of the Amidah. It's leaving out all the Kaddishes. And then choosing to do a few of the piyutim as suggested. But we just have 5 minutes left. It's a long davening. It's a real challenge. I think it's a doable challenge. But you can spend some time to really look at the words. Look for the theme. See how God's kingship is expressed. See what we remember when we have the remembrances part of the Musaf Amidah. See what events do we choose to remember? How do we anticipate and want God, and anticipate God as King? And these types of themes. This is an opportunity to really spend some time because you don't have to rush. You don't have to rush. And at the same time, I recognize this is not easy to daven on one's own. And the challenge for us here really is to navigate, between these 2 points. Both viewing this as an opportunity to really focus and look at the Machzor, and also being honest about the challenge of davening individually. Now, there is lots of material on the web currently that has good commentary on the Machzor. I highly suggest you spend some time doing some Google searches. There is a lot of material that is out there. And that can also be very helpful to you. Also to think about not only the words of the Machzor, but some of you may want to focus on the more personal questions, the questions we mentioned last week about Chana. What do I really want to pray for this year? What am I really lacking? What do I see that the world is lacking? And how those visions fit into the liturgy that we'll be reciting. And I just want to, I have 1 minute, I just want to mention one thing. I was reading something by Yochanan Mufs about this notion of God as king. And he points, I just want to read one paragraph. He says as follows, in Mesopotamian royal inscriptions, non-Jewish, kings pride themselves not merely on how many cities they conquered, but on what specific benefits they bestowed upon their people. How many aqueducts they built, how they stabilized prices, how just they were, how they prevented the rich from oppressing the poor, how they were fathers to the orphans. And he adds, the whole of Jewish theology is there. God the King is just, God is kind, God is great and gracious provider. The king symbolizes the benign uses of power. God was the king was a father, a mother, a nurturer. And as the psalmist sings, when my father and mother abandon me, then the Lord will take me in. And he says, this is the secret of the Jewish prayer formula, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, O God, King of the universe. Kingship in the blessing is an expression of kindness rather than severity. It is the combination of strength and kindness that is God's hallmark and seal. So when we talk about the kingship of God in Rosh Hashanah, I think it's important to keep these things in mind. The image of God, and the image, therefore, for which we really should emulate, is one that is concerned with justice and envisioning a just world, thinking about what we can do to evoke that, one which is imbued with compassion, who understands they have to look after the one who are less fortunate, and one who is concerned with the just and with strength and with compassion. And that is the sense of God who we are coronating on Rosh Hashanah. That is the kingship of God we want to coronate. And that's also the challenge for us to how we should take these ideas and how they can touch us in our own lives. And ask, what can we do in our lives that shows we are living as though God is king? What can we do in our own lives that just as God remembers, we remember others as well? Right? What do we anticipate? What do we envision for the future, which is that third team of Shofarot of Musaf? So use this as an opportunity, I think, to think about some of these big questions, but some of these big questions, how they relate to your own life wherever you are in your life. And with that, it's 8 o'clock, and I think I'm supposed to stop.
Rabbi, thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to go to the other Zoom room for Myrav and Slichas. But I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, just feel free to be in touch. It's michaelbalinsky@gmail.com. But I hope this was, I know it was a lot, but I hope just to get a sense, you can rely on the chart. I think it should give you a good sense of direction. So thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.